This is Film Financing Demystified with Tyler Gould of Bondit Media Capital. Thanks everybody for joining us. Yay! As Shana just said, this is a bit of a distracting day or week or year, possibly. So thanks for taking some time away from everything that's happening and being with us to learn about financing. Thank you, Tyler, for being here.
Yeah, of course.
Really appreciate your time.
Glad to speak with you guys.
I know you're going to teach us a lot. I mean, at least me, I could certainly learn a lot about this subject. So I'm excited to dive in.
All right. So hi, everybody. I'm Shana Weber. I'm the Manager of Production and Research at ISA, and I host some of these webinars. We are doing a conversation today about demystifying film financing, and I certainly need that information as well. So we are here welcoming Tyler Gould from Bondit.
Hey, everyone.
Hello. Usually sometimes I do like an intro and read your little bio, but I think I just want to dive in with you. Why don't you tell us who you are, a little bit about your career path to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Gould. I'm an analyst at Bondit Media Capital. I'm relatively new to the industry. I've been with Bondit for about 2 years now, and came here straight after I graduated from college. I went to school at Northwestern University. Actually interned for Bondit over the summer of 2018, I believe it was. And they were a bit smaller then and still really expanding and growing, and came to the internship at sort of the right time where they were looking to hire additional employees, and had never had employees before, actually. So kind of worked with the management team and seeing what bottlenecks they had, and kind of helping build out what exactly the role that I have now looks like. And I was actually finishing up my senior year at Northwestern and doing part-time work with Bondit for that entire year, and then moved out to LA in 2019 and have been with the team ever since.
And what does an analyst do? So what do you do with Bondit? And then we'll talk about what Bondit does.
yeah, definitely. There's a lot that goes into my day-to-day, and no day actually looks the same. There's a lot of kind of your typical analyst type work that you would find at a finance company, running Excel models and different spreadsheets and different sorts of analyses and whatnot. But a lot of my day is just general deal support. At Bondit specifically, we probably have anywhere from 20 to 40 deals in the pipeline at any given time, with about 4 to 5 that are really immediately actionable fundings that we are looking at closing. And as you can imagine with those, there's a lot of different phone calls, email back and forth. So I do some legal support, drafting some documents here and there, running pricing models for the closing, as well as any kind of new projects that come in. I evaluate the different packages and help kind of guide people in the right direction of, okay, what else would we need in order for us to actually fund and close a loan for that production.
Okay, so let's act as if our viewers are sort of coming in at zero.
Sure.
Like, what is Bondit? What do you guys do? And how does somebody who is not maybe represented or has their own company, or like, how do young filmmakers come to Bondit, or how does that process work? So let's just start first with, what does Bondit do? And then let's talk about your guys' process with filmmakers.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll talk a lot about this today throughout the seminar, but the key differentiation in film finance is 2 buckets of capital, essentially. So you have your equity financing and then your debt financing. So Bondit is a debt financier, meaning we're giving loans to projects as opposed to taking pure upside risk with your project. So that essentially means that our loans have to be secured by collateral. So in the film industry, collateral can take many different forms, but the most frequent deal that we are engaging with is a loan secured by a tax credit, or a loan secured by a distribution agreement. So a very simple example of that would be, say you have built out your project with, a script, you have a producing team, you have a couple of actors on board, and then a budget. And so you're coming at it from a point of, how do I reach the budget and actually get enough money to make the film? So you can take that package and shop it around to distributors and sell the film before you actually have made the film. And that doesn't mean completely selling all of the rights to exploit it. It could just be a territory here or there. But what a distributor will do is they'll put up an agreement. It's called a minimum guarantee. And that is essentially guaranteeing a floor of what they will buy the film for once it is delivered to you. So Netflix, for example, could put up a $1 million minimum guarantee for your film, which is a contract, a binding agreement saying, if you deliver the film with, it's X minutes long, it's of a certain MPAA rating, it has these essential elements, then we agree to pay $1 million for your film. And so that is an example of a piece of collateral that Bondit would be able to lend against. So if there is nothing along those lines, no formal security or piece of collateral, then there's not much Bondit can do, because so we're structured as we're a fund. We're owned by a private equity company based out of Toronto and New York and Chicago. And then we have a credit facility as well based out of Texas. So we have certain credit checks before we're allowed to deploy capital into a film. And if there isn't that baseline security, then it's not even a deal that we would be able to look at. So Bondit is a lender. We're not an equity investor. So everything that we approach when evaluating a project is, what is the baseline collateral package and how much can we lend against that? And then kind of the second step to that process is our loan enough to cover the budget? Because if the budget, say, is $2 million, but our loan is only $1 million, then our security, which would be the minimum guarantee from Netflix, is effectively worthless until the film is actually created. So we need to make sure that our loan plus any other funds that are coming to production are already secured, and that there's enough money to actually make the film. Because without that, then we can't get our money back. And there are scenarios where our loan is covering 100% of the budget. So that's kind of the second piece of evaluating, is what we call it is your finance plan complete?
Right. So let's go.
Sure.
Let's go back to, I'm going to have you define some terms. And then
Absolutely.
after that, then let's go through sort of the process, the stages of getting your film or whatever project ready to come to somebody like Bondit. So can we do that? Okay.
Yeah.
So there are all these like words out there that you've said a few while you're talking. It's like, wait, what? Let's just try to like take it to this place of definitions. So what exactly is equity?
Yeah. So Equity, I don't know what exactly the formal definition of
That's okay.
equity is, but it is essentially an unsecured piece of capital that can go into a film without any form or expectation of repayment.
Do you have an
So
example?
yeah, so equity is ideally what every filmmaker wants in their film, which is it's essentially banking the project and hoping that the project sells, as opposed to selling it beforehand and having a specific piece of security to pay you back. And so equity is actually ownership within the project. So an equity investor is expecting to see profits beyond just a minimum repayment. So
Okay.
our loan has a set term and a set amount of interest that we charge on our loan, and that's all we're looking to recoup.
Okay.
Whereas an equity investor is actually purchasing part of the film and part of the potential revenue for the future. So so an equity investor can recoup their initial equity investment, and then any additional proceeds beyond that, they're sharing in the profit with the filmmaker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for that. What is, and these are things that I found on the Bondit site of going through kind of your process.
Yeah.
What is, and I'm going to do like 7 or 8 of these. What is senior debt, or senior debt and mezzanine debt?
Yeah. So there's an order to repayment when you invest in a film, and it's called the Waterfall. So your senior debt sits at the very, very top of the waterfall. It's senior to all other investment positions. And typically senior debt has some sort of firm collateral that you're lending against. So again, that would be a distribution agreement or a tax credit, something that is a guaranteed value that is going to pay back the lender. It's typically viewed as the safest piece of money that goes into a film. And the senior debt holder is expecting to be, I mean, everyone is ideally expecting to be repaid.
It's
but
like, who's first? Yeah.
Exactly, but senior is top of the waterfall.
Okay.
So mezzanine debt, mezzanine just means, I think the actual literal definition of it is second level. So the mezzanine debt would sit directly below the senior debt. And so typically a mezzanine investor would be lending against what are called unsold territories. So that would be when you, I might have skipped a step here, but when
we'll never know, right?
Yeah, when you're getting ready to sell your project, you typically bring on a sales agent to help sell your project to the various distributors around the world. So while you may personally have a connection with, a US distributor, you probably don't know, who's buying content in Turkey, right?
Right.
So that's why you bring on a sales agent who has all those connections with buyers across the world. And what a sales agent will do is they put together an estimates sheet for you, which goes territory by territory, breaking down how much they think they can sell your film for in each specific territory. So it'll literally be like China, $400,000, Latin America, $300,000, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And so any territory on that sales sheet that is not sold would be called an unsold territory. And you can lend against those, but again, it would be projection based. So there's no actual collateral there. You're just hoping that the film will sell in that territory. And so typically mezzanine investors are sitting below the senior debt. And well, they're always sitting below senior debt, but they will have carved out a couple of specific territories that they are lending against. So you could see a mezzanine lender that is lending against just the United States.
Right.
Or something like that.
Okay. Let's talk about tax incentives.
Sure. So shooting a film and producing a film, you create a lot of jobs, right? So states want to have films shoot in their state because it creates a bunch of different microeconomies. So you know, you hire local cast, you hire local crew and equipment vendors, and you're paying location people. And you know, a film anywhere upwards of $500,000 to $100 million, that's a lot of different jobs and money that is getting spent within the state. So states have tax credit programs to incentivize you to shoot in the state. And what that means is they will refund a portion of the money that you spend at a point down the line. So California actually recently is bringing back their tax credit, but for a while it's been gone. But the state that you typically see is like New Mexico, right? So we have a film shooting in New Mexico right now that is qualifying for a tax credit. So the budget there is about, I think it's a $1.5 million film. And based on the qualified expenses in the state of New Mexico, based on, you know, they're hiring local crew and equipment vendors, they get a portion of that back to them down the road. It's typically ranges anywhere from 20% to 40%.
Where, do you know of a good resource that people can go to see what states are offering what incentives? Or is that something?
Yeah, actually. So the Bondit website at the very bottom of the page has an incentive guide.
Oh, cool.
And it's a map of the US, and you can hover above states and see which states have what incentives and kind of what it looks like. There's a key, I don't know if this might be too nitty gritty, but there's a difference between a tax credit and a tax rebate. And so, and both kind of affect the value of how much we could lend to you to make the movie. So a tax rebate is cash back. So it's just pure cash that you can use and spend however you want. Whereas a tax credit, you have to deduct against your income in that state. So in order to actually monetize that and turn that into cash, you typically have to sell it to someone who can deduct it against their income statement, if that makes sense. Sort of.
But I'm sure that, you know, once you're there, you can.
Right, exactly. You would either have $400,000 in a rebate, which would just be $400,000 in cash.
Right.
$400,000 is an arbitrary number. I don't know why I came up with that. But, and then you could have $400,000 in a credit, which means that you can deduct $400,000 of taxes owed to the government against your income statement in that state. And if you don't own a business in New Mexico, say, you have to then transfer the credit to someone that does own a business in that state. And so, you know, if I own a business and you're what you essentially have to sell it at a discount. So if I want to deduct I'm a business in New Mexico, I want to deduct $400,000 from my income statement, I can buy that credit from you for $380,000 so that I'm saving a little bit of money. And then you as the filmmaker now have $380,000.
Right. Brian's asking in the chat, are you referencing section 181?
I do not. I'm not that into tax code and what exactly that looks like, but it could be.
All right. Well, Brian, you should Google that and just see. Okay, so let's get into a couple more terms, and then we'll sort of get into like the process of what a filmmaker would do and who they need to have on their team and everything. Let's talk about packaging. What exactly is packaging, and demystify that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So once you have a script, it's essentially just words on a page, right? So you need to, in order to make the film, take it from a script to something that has a little bit more tangible value behind it. So if you're just a writer, that could be assembling a producer to help you make the project. And then if you're not directing, you can attach a director to the project. And then you can build out, physical materials as well to help pitch the project. So a pitch deck, a budget, a strip board schedule. And then you can go out to cast members and say, hey, I'm making this project. We're targeting roughly $1.5 million budget, and we'll pay you X amount to be in this movie. And if they like the project, or they just want to get paid, they'll join on to the project. And essentially that is what a package would be. So it's a project that has more elements on it than just the script. Right. Or in certain cases, it might not even be a script. It could be you have the rights to a book, but you've attached a director who is going to direct, the script that comes out of the book, and you've attached a writer to write the IP. That could be a package. Sure. And it's essentially something that you can just shop to various distributors, people that have the money to either give to you to make the film, or that will give to you at a later date that we can then, that like a lending company like Bondit could then lend against.
Right. So let's talk about these three terms: pre-sale, sure. Gap financing, and finishing funds.
Yeah. So a pre-sale is essentially just a minimum guarantee. It just implies that the sale is made to a distributor prior to the film actually getting made. So
how would something like that happen? How would you get, and this might be a bigger question, but how would you go about getting a pre-sale with a distributor if you don't have like your whole together?
You typically need to assemble the package before you can go out and get a pre-sale. So that's what everyone refers to as like the packaging stage. That's prior to actually
even going
and shopping the project. In certain rare instances, if you were to sell a project straight to a studio, they would probably just buy the rights outright and just give you a check for it.
Right.
And in that case, maybe because they maybe really love the script, but that is something that we all would love to happen. But in most cases, and at least in the world that we're involved in, which is a bit more on the indie side, that is pretty rare. So sorry, we got a little sidetracked there, but that's what a pre-sale is just selling the film before it's actually made.
Okay, and then what's gap financing?
So gap financing is lending against unsold territories, or the projection-based lending. So a mezzanine lender would be providing gap financing.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that. And then finishing funds.
So finishing funds, typically we'll see a couple of projects that get submitted to us that might be a certain, like halfway through production, and they've run out of money and they need funds to finish the film. Or a film that's in post-production, they need finishing funds. So like oftentimes you'll see there will be various resources that have grants, finishing grants that will require that you're at X stage of production, and then they'll give you money if you win the grant. Does that make sense?
Kind of. So are finishing funds, like sometimes is it somebody that that you bring in when say you need $500,000 more for your budget of $5 million or whatever. Sometimes is it somebody who comes in and they're like, all right, this is the last money to come in and it's the first money that gets paid back? Or is that the first money that comes in is usually the first money that gets paid back? I'm always confused
No,
about that.
it is typically last money in is the first money to come out.
Right.
So Bondit is an example of a company that is last money in, first money out, because we're a senior lender. And we can have simultaneous fundings as well. So in that case, we wouldn't necessarily be last money in, but simultaneously the last money. Finishing funds more just implies that you have completed a portion of production.
Oh, okay.
And then need additional money to finish production.
Okay,
so whether
and
or
that
not
makes sense for a grant. Yeah.
Right. Whether or not that's, actual physical production, or maybe you've wrapped physical production and are in post-production and need additional funds to finish the film.
Right. Oh, Shooty. Hi, Shooty. She's asking what's the difference between buying a territory outright and gap financing?
Between buying a territory outright and gap financing? That's a good question. So if you are buying, so it depends on whether or not you are putting in equity or debt. But if you are putting in equity, you can buy that territory, meaning that anytime, any additional overages beyond what the film is bought for by the distributor, you'll get a portion, or you'll get all of those proceeds. Whereas if you lend against that territory, you're essentially committing yourself to a fixed amount and a fixed amount of interest that you'll be paid back. So that's kind of the difference between buying it versus lending against it.
Right. Okay, so
Does
let's
that kind
talk
of make
about,
sense?
let's talk about distributors in general.
Sure.
What is distribution? Who are these distributors? And how do you find them?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've made your film, and now you need to get it out to the audiences and to the rest of the world. So the distributor does that for you, whether or not it's a distributor who is direct to consumer like Netflix, or maybe there's a studio that is selling to another distributor in a foreign territory that is then putting it on a TV channel or something in that territory. So the distributor, for lack of a better word, is distributing and selling the film around the world to get it in front of audiences. And so, again, there's a variety of different channels that you can get a film in front of an audience. There could be, you could see it in the theater, you could see it online, you could see it in TV, VOD, etc. And so a distributor sets up those individual deals and transactions for you to be able to see the film. So like Netflix is straight to consumer, and versus a studio who has a theatrical release on the film, they would be working with the theater company, AMC, to distribute the film in theaters. And then they would be setting up another deal with, a TV network to sell the film, or to have the TV network put it on TV.
So then would AMC be the distributor? And
no,
then
AMC in that case is an exhibitor.
Right. So what's a company that maybe we would know that is the distributor? So they're the ones who then go to AMC or go to Netflix or go to the buyers, right? The exhibitors?
Yeah. So that any distributor, so like example of that. So Netflix is a distributor, and any of the major studios are distributors.
Okay.
And so it's thinking of major distributors, so like Lionsgate, Universal, Warner Brothers, those are all distributors. And sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second.
It's okay. Just trying to find when you say you're a writer, because most of our audience are screenwriters or, sort of indie filmmakers at the beginning stages of that, or they've made a couple shorts or they've made a feature. Just if you had your script and you were maybe trying to find a production company, then
Mhm.
like, what are those stages? Let's go back to that. So what are those stages in the process of getting to a place where, one, you would go to Bondit
Mhm.
to ask for, financing?
Yep.
Let's just start from the very beginning. So first you have a script.
Yep.
Then what do you do?
Yeah, so it depends on if you want to produce the film or if you want to
Let's just
have
say you want to
someone
make
else.
your own film.
Okay,
So let's
so
say you have like
self-producing.
self-produce or direct or something like that.
Okay, got it. So once you have a script and you want to produce, you'll probably want to bring on some additional team members to help you produce, just kind of distribute the workload. And then from there, you kind of have the seeds for a project and you just want to make it something that's more tangible. So you want to probably build out a budget and figure out, okay, so what's the cost of this movie? And then from there, it's all about how do we actually get money to make the film. And so there are kind of two avenues that you can take from there. You can try and essentially package the film and then sell it to a distributor so that a company like Bondit could lend against the film or to lend against that agreement in order to get money for the production. Or what you can do is you could try and get equity financing for the film. So that would be like pitching the project to a production company that has an equity fund. So in that case, you're not actually going out to distributors prior to the project being made.
Okay.
They're essentially banking the project and saying, we like this, we like the team that you've assembled, and we believe that it's going to do well. So you can either, at that stage, go to those different production companies and pitch it with just, the script and the budget and the team that you've assembled. Or you can, another option is you can package the film further and then try and get it equity financed. So what that would look like is, so you have your script and your budget and a couple of producing team members. From there, you probably want a director. If you're self-directing, you would go to cast is kind of the next logical step, and try and get, increase the value of the film by getting cast on board. And then from there, it's about finding a financing source.
Right. And where do people go? This is a question that's asked all the time to us at ISA, and maybe you can shed some light on this.
Sure.
And it's that huge question of, where do you go to find people who are going to finance your film? If you're an indie filmmaker who maybe doesn't have a great track record or has this huge movie that you've made, like, how do people start that process?
Yeah, so if you don't really have a long track record, it is going to be very difficult to get your film financed. If you're a first-time director or even a second-time director, getting someone to take that risk is, whether it's a distributor or an equity investor, it's very difficult. So what we pretty often see with first-time filmmakers is a lot of crowdsource funding or reaching out to people in their individual network, and essentially just trying to cobble together enough money to make to make the best version of the project that you can, and kind of show your work and display your work, so that the next time around you can say, look, this is what I did with a $30,000 budget, and then kind of collectively scale upwards from there. There was a second part to what I was going to say. Yeah.
We're all sort of like, wait, what is happening in the world?
So a very key part about, getting a film made, and everyone says this, is, Hollywood's built on relationships. And so either you personally need to have relationships with people that you can send your project to that will potentially add value to your film, or you need to have someone on your team that has really good relationships. Because if you send out a script cold to, you know, a production company or a manager, for whatever purpose, maybe you want the production company to come on board to your project, or you're looking for, you know, this actress in particular, and so you're reaching out to their agent. If you have no prior interaction with them, they're probably not going to read your email. So you need to kind of build your network and or have someone on your team that has really good relationships that, you know, can go out to the agents and managers, can go out to the different production companies and distributors and kind of help build that package and help bring value to the film.
Right. You got to work with what you have and then keep growing who you know and what you have, and eventually you could probably get to a place. So should writers, do you think that somebody who's a writer who's also either a filmmaker or aspiring filmmaker, do you think that while they're writing their script, they should be thinking about budget if they are wanting to go make this film themselves? Do you think that's something, or do you think, I mean, this is really just an opinion thing because scripts can be rewritten and like reworked, but what's your take on sort of really honing in on your budget as a screenwriter?
Yeah, I think, again, it really just depends on what you want to do with the script. So if you want to make it yourself and you're going to be a first time or second time director, you probably do want to write with a budget in mind, keeping in mind that you are likely going to be shooting for $1.5 million or less. So you're going to want to avoid, you know, crazy action films.
And you should shoot for a lower budget if you're somebody who is fairly new, because
if you want to make the film yourself, yes. If you you know, are trying to sell the film to, you know, potentially a studio or a production company, then I would say definitely not, because then you're just putting restrictions on yourself as a writer, and that just doesn't help the creative process. I'm actually a writer, funnily enough, and I was
about to ask you that if you're a writer too.
I wrote a screenplay with a friend of mine from like April to July, and it's pretty wonky and out there, and it would be upwards of $70 million to make. Nice. And so we knew that going in, like, you know, this is not something that we're trying to get made in the next year. And if it was something that we wanted to get made in the next year, it would be someone else that would be making it. It would be us selling the script and someone else making it.
So I guess it's more like have realistic expectations of, if you're going to write a $70 million script, then don't expect to go make that yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you're
right
J.
off the bat,
Abrams.
I guess. Yeah, exactly. Maybe down the line, 10 years when you're like J.J. Abrams.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to do one more question, then I'm going to try to get to, we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A.
Sure.
But let's just break down for me, say somebody has their package together, they're ready to go. Sometimes we have fear of reaching out to a company like Bondit because say, oh, they're never going to like talk to me, I'm just this person or whatever. So what are the steps for somebody to actually reach out to you guys? How does that process work? And what do you guys then do with that? Is it just an initial meeting, or like what's the process with you guys?
Yeah, so it depends on kind of what stage your project's in. So if you reach out to me and you just have a screenplay and nothing else on board, then I'm probably going to direct you over to our sister company, Buffalo 8 Productions. So Buffalo 8 is a full service production company with various divisions, depending on what stage of production you're in. So we have a development division, we have a production division, we have a post-production division, and a distribution division. So I would direct it to the development division and say, you know, if you want to work with us, this is kind of what we would require, and this is kind of how we work with projects that are in this early stage. So
and are
if we,
those only solicited? Like, do you have to have representation sending something over, or do you
no,
guys look at everything?
we
Or,
look at
I don't know.
everything.
Yeah, okay.
That's kind of
Okay.
something that we try and pride ourselves on as
Right.
a company. And even if, you know, it turns out to just not be a project for us, we still want to just point you in the right direction and you know, be a resource to
Awesome.
filmmakers. So feel free to, you know, to send out my email address on your mailing list or whatnot. And I can do my best to kind of direct you in the proper area or answer any questions you might have.
Okay.
And so then, you know, if you come to me with a project, you know, you have a budget, you have a producing team on board, maybe you have a director, then it becomes a little bit easier to work with in terms of, okay, like how would I try and set this up? And so from Bondit's perspective, since we're a lender, we're always going to be approaching it from who, you know, which distributors can we sell this to? And, you know, do we think it's a fit for the market? And it'll kind of just be an evaluation based on that.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you'll get projects that are late stages that are right up on its alley that are fully packaged, fully developed, already have secured the distribution agreements, and then are saying, how much can you give me against, you know, $1 million agreement from Netflix?
Right.
And that's when I would be running a pricing model for you and saying, we'll give you $850,000, we'll have $100,000 of interest, et cetera.
Right. Okay, cool. So let's get to, we have like a bunch of questions in the Q&A, and I want to try to get to as many of these as we can. So I haven't really vetted these, so I'm just going to try to jump in. And if you don't have an answer for it, or you're like, totally fine. Don't feel like you're like have to pull something out of, you know, thin air. Because I'm not sure if all of these are, okay. So Shane Walker is asking, if I have a project at a certain budget, how do I identify talent that can fit into that budget? In other words, how do I make an offer without the agent not taking the offer? Wait, how do I make an offer without the agent not taking the offer seriously? So does that make sense? I think it's saying, how do you know what talent would fit into your budget for your film without embarrassing yourself when you go and ask? Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, typically most A-list talent will command upwards of 6 figures in your project. And if you don't have actual money to make an offer with, if you don't have any funds in escrow, then you're essentially trying to get the project in front of the talent and have them like the project enough to come on board so that you can shop the project.
Right. Like sign a letter of intent to be involved with it if you do get the funding. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Because, you know, it's difficult for, you know, an agent to want to support a project that doesn't have actually funds in escrow or like money ready to give to the talent if they come on board. So they just want to know your project's real and that if they're putting time into it, that it is going to go somewhere. And so, you know, oftentimes producers will put together projects that don't have any sort of development funds to make, you know, initial talent deposits to. And that's a lot of times just based on reputation and relationships and people knowing that you're going to be able to come through and make the project.
Right. And I think on that, to answer further into that question, I think you have to look at, you know, comps of if you're doing a $1 million horror movie, you have to go find some up and coming talent who would be willing to, you know, to do that with you. I don't think you're going to go to somebody like Nicole Kidman if you have $1 million, unless you have a personal relationship with somebody who knows her and she's like, oh, this would be fun to jump on board, something like this. So I think you just have to do some homework and try to find, you know, find somebody that you think is like coming up the ranks and hey, get them while they're like fresh, you know, try to get them on board while they're fresh. And if your script's good enough or your project's good enough, then maybe it entices them to be like, hey, this is helping me. I'm helping you. Like it's a, you know, you want people on your project that are positive and like are supportive and want to do the good work with you, especially when you have no budget, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or small budget. Okay, so Brian Keith Ellis is asking, so if I have a film with both tax credits and an MG in place and
Mhm.
attached talent, you'd be a place to approach about having a look at the project.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do send it over because that sounds right up our alley.
Awesome. Okay, so Luke is asking, in what scenarios would Bondit 100% fund the production of a film?
That's a difficult question to say because there's a lot of different moving pieces that come into a project, especially now during COVID. The best chance you have of us being like this deal we really want to get involved in is it has to probably be above $1 million budget, because anything lower than that we might consider to be too small, but we have done very small deals in the past, and done films. But as recently as 2 weeks ago, we funded the film that had a $600,000 budget, and you need to have collateral in place and enough collateral so that with Bondit's loan you cover the budget. And if you have all of that secured, then you have a pretty good chance. But then again, we still have to go through the necessary underwriting steps and make sure we're comfortable with you as a producer. It has to pass our credit team. So there isn't anything that's like, oh, this is guaranteed to get funding.
Right.
But if you have all of those elements, then you have a good chance.
How often do you guys do that? 100% fund a film? Or even 85% fund a film? Have there been like special
in terms of funding the entire budget? I would say probably half of our films we fund the entire budget.
Wow.
Anything that's under 5 million, or I'd say under 7.5, we can fund entirely ourselves. Anything greater than that, we'll probably have to bring in a partner to co-finance.
Awesome. Joe Beatty is asking, what is gap, super gap financing, and bridge financing?
Yeah, so gap financing, as we touched on earlier, is the lending against unsold. So bridge financing is you are bridging the senior lender's closing. So in a case, this is typically for budgets that are probably greater than $2 million. If you have a lender like Bondit or another bank that's going to close the film or lend to the film, that process can take a while, and you might have to pay actor deposits and location deposits and other different fees. And so a bridge lender would come in essentially and say, I have enough confidence that the senior lender is going to close, that I'm going to provide temporary financing. And then once the senior lender closes, that's how you get paid back. So it's very short term and it's very high risk. So it's also very expensive because of that. So Bondit does do bridge loans as well.
Okay. Alan is asking, regarding tax credits, is it true that it's advisable to apply early in the year to avoid a situation where the state runs out of money in their funds allocated?
Yeah, I would say that does happen. So whenever you're at a stage where you realistically think you have a path to production, then you do want to get your applications in early.
That's a good question. Marilyn is asking if you'll talk about completion bonds, the advantages and disadvantages, and are they an advantage with Bondit?
Yeah, so you don't need to have a bond in order for us to consider the deal.
What is a completion bond?
So a completion bond is essentially insurance. It's a third-party company that says we guarantee that the film will be completed. So that you get a completion bond for a financier like us to feel more comfortable with the production risk. But we don't require one, and oftentimes I would say most of our projects actually don't have a bond because it is more expensive, and then B, the closing process is a lot longer if you have a completion bond. If you're getting a bank to lend to you, then there will have to be a completion bond every time. So a bank's cost, like a bank will charge less interest than we do because we're a private company, but you'll have to go through the bonding process, and it'll run up your costs and take longer. But the financing fees will be less on the loan.
Okay. Steve is asking, if you have a potential lender and you're not sure about them, what's the best way to do your due diligence to find out about them?
That's a good question.
It is a good question. No, I was like,
Yeah.
I want to know that.
I would say, you probably want to reach out to them and then just have a conversation about what does their pricing look like? How quickly can you close? What are your requirements to close? Do you require any sort of personal or corporate guarantees? Kind of along those lines, because I think at the end of the day, you want to get a company that is fast and customer and client dedicated, and also is transparent, someone you want to work with, and
Right.
ideally doesn't charge you a ton of interest and fees.
Okay, let's see. Tony, Nebraska, that's an awesome name, Tony, Nebraska, is asking, suppose I'm a writer with a script and I attach a director and a DP.
Yep.
Would all our credit come into play for financing, or could only certain team members' credit apply?
Credit meaning like the film credit or
maybe
tax credit?
I think he's talking about their own, like maybe their like credibility credit, like their, maybe, I don't know. Tony, put in the Q&A, elaborate. Let's go to a different one. Okay.
Sorry, Tony.
Yeah, sorry. We're like, hey, what? Shane is asking, what genres is Bondit looking for right now or next year? Like, what are you guys looking for? What do you think's going on?
Yeah, so Bondit is genre agnostic. Since most
I'm
of
gonna use that term now. I'm genre agnostic. That's awesome.
Yes, because most of the projects that we attach ourselves to, we're not necessarily evaluating for their creative merit. We're evaluating more for what's the collateral package in place, and is the finance plan complete, versus is this a project that we think is going to do really well, because that would just be projection based lending and we don't really do a whole lot of that. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Bridget is asking, I'm in Pennsylvania, tax credit is 25%, but you can't even apply for them until you are 80% funded. How would I work around that? My budget is 2.5 and developed.
Got it. So, I think what you would need to do in that situation is you would need to arrange the rest of the financing, and then you could have a company like Bondit or any other lender put up an LOI for that remaining chunk. So say, the tax credit is going to be, the last 20% of your financing. And we could write an LOI saying, subject to further due diligence and completion of conditions precedent, we'll come in and lend against the Pennsylvania tax credit. And most of the time they'll accept that along with your application.
So the answer is reach out to Bondit, reach out to Tyler.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's another one from Tony. So we couldn't answer the first one, but maybe we can answer this one. If the majority of my story takes place in Louisiana, would I factor the financial benefits of filming in that location in the amount I ask for, or is that irrelevant to the producer or financier? Majority.
Sorry, yeah, can you repeat the question?
If the majority of my story takes place in Louisiana, would I factor the financial benefits of filming in that location, maybe tax, right? In the amount I ask for, or is that irrelevant to the producer or financer?
I would say it's mostly irrelevant, just because we recognize what the request of the amount you're looking for is, but at the end of the day, we evaluate how much we're going to give based on what the collateral is worth. So, if you're asking for $100,000, but the collateral is only worth, $101,000, probably not getting $100,000. You're going to get less.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think I know you touched on this before, but let's just get another answer. So the budgets that you guys work with are usually below 5 million, like between 1 and 5. Is that right?
Yeah. So our sweet spot is under 6, I would say. But we work with projects that are bigger than that. It's just, we would co-fund as opposed to funding entirely ourselves. We won't, so for minimums, we won't fund anything that's under $100,000.
Okay.
So
that takes me to the next question. Does Bondit finance short films?
We do not.
Okay.
So yeah, most of the time short films, the budgets are just too small.
Yeah.
And also there isn't really a market for short films. We do have a partnership with Screencraft though, which does have a grant fund for short films or other films. So you should check that out.
And Carol's asking about your thoughts on American film market. So she says, I have an award-winning script, pitch deck, trailer, and budget, but no attachments or financing. What should I network with the American film market next week? That's next week.
Yeah, definitely. I think, going back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, it's all about building your network and, developing relationships with high quality people and other people that have good relationships. And AFM is a pretty popular market, and there are a lot of people from around the world that go. So I would definitely recommend networking there. I would be going, but it's all virtual, and so it's not quite the same sort of market in the past.
Right.
So yeah,
it's a bummer, huh?
It is a bummer.
Penelope's asking, we'll just do a couple more and then we'll wrap this up. Penelope's asking, what percentage would a producer expect to get paid from the budget plus when selling your film if they own the IP?
Yeah, so it depends on a couple of different things. Kind of depends on if you're giving profit participation to talent, or if there's an equity investor involved. Typically the producer will retain about 25 to 50%, I'd say, of the profit, and then they take fees in the budget as well. And depending on who the producer is, they can range from $25,000 all the way up to a quarter, or not a quarter, probably like a fifth of the budget.
All right. I'm just going to scroll through these really fast and see if there's anything that we didn't touch on. Let's see. Oh, maybe you can answer this one. Steve's asking, how do you work out the waterfall payback with lenders as you go?
Yeah, so if you're engaging with a company like Bondit, we're going to be first in the waterfall. And I would just say, it's an ongoing conversation. And if you're saying, this person already has first position, would you take second position, or would you go pari passu, which means pay back at the same time? Then that's just something you have to be upfront and transparent about, like while you're discussing the deal.
Okay. Oh, Tony wrote, he elaborated. He was referencing the credit checks that you brought up earlier. So when you said during the process, you have to do, check the credits. That's what
yeah. So the biggest team members that we kind of make sure we're comfortable with when going into production is the director, how much experience they have, the AD, and the line producer, and the main producer. Those are kind of most of the people that we do diligence on.
Okay, that you bet, yeah. I think that is pretty much it for our questions. So is there any last things that we didn't cover that you want to talk about, or any fun stories you want to tell about Bondit? I don't know.
That's a good question. I think, yeah, feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to answer your questions or do my best to. we're very busy right now, so it might take a little while before I get back to you.
Yeah, I guess that's a good question. What's the climate like for you guys during this like pandemic and, you know, all this stuff going on and like looking towards the future next year?
Yeah. So we, when the initial shutdown happened, so from about March to June, we weren't sending anything into production. And so we were mostly doing corporate deals. Since we do have a fund, we do, I'd say 80% of our portfolio is lending to film projects, and then another 20% is lending to companies. So we had a lot more deals lending to companies, and then completed projects that, you know, we're looking for finishing funds. But then around July, once a couple of states kind of opened up production, it was kind of like a switch flipped, and all of a sudden we were extraordinarily busy, and that has kind of kept going up through now. You know, we have, I think, looking at our whiteboard, we have 5 films or so going in the next 2 months, and they're all like $5 to $20 million budgets. So we're very, very busy right now, and we are actively sending things to production. So we've gotten ourselves comfortable with kind of the COVID risk and what the necessary protocols will be for you to keep the production safe and make sure that there isn't a shutdown.
Are those all features, or do you guys do TV also?
We do TV as well.
Okay.
But it tends to be mostly features, but we have one TV project that's going right now. It's technically new media, but it'll be TV.
So much information given. I hope we help to demystify a little bit film financing. And Tyler has been generous enough. If you do have questions or anything, you can reach out to him.
There's also a FAQ page on our website as well.
Oh, good.
So you can reference that.
Awesome.
That might be
able
to answer
what's your website?
Questions.
Let's put that out there. Bondit.us.
Bondit.us.
Okay.
And then our sister production company is Buffalo 8, and that's buffalo8.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Tyler, so much. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. And we have tons of events coming up. So if you didn't hear from Molly at the beginning, check out our events page, and we'll see you guys very soon.